Hi there, it's Rose Marcus, and today is October 5th, 2018. Venus began retrograde earlier today in the sign of Scorpio, 10 degrees Scorpio. It will back into Libra on October 31st to finish out the retrograde on November 16 at about 25 degrees Libra. On December 2nd, it will return to Scorpio. About the 12th of December, it will be through the shadow phase, recovering the degrees that it recovering the degree that it turned retrograde at today, and will continue on in Scorpio through the beginning of January. So it's Venus all the way through the end of the year. And so Venus is the relationship planet, one half of the relationship pairing, Venus and Mars has been very active in 2018 as well too. We're going through an intensified phase. As Mick Jagger sang, you can't always get what you want, but you will get what you need out of this transit, and that is based on what the soul deems is important for you to revisit, review, and reassess now. So this is all about the soul journey. So we've got some pretty big stuff coming up here. And let me show you a vision of our planet Venus. There she is in her beauty, and in this she's in her gibbous phase. Here is the Rosetta. It's a diagram of the Venus retrograde cycles. Now, Venus retrograde takes a retrograde once every 18 months, and it does that over a 5-year period, over 5 retrograde cycles over an 8-year period. It forms this Rosetta that you can see here on the screen, or the 5-pointed star. So Venus retrogrades in one of 5 signs over the course of 8 years. And that is a 100-year pattern, actually 104-year pattern. And currently the 5 signs that Venus is retrograding in are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Scorpio, and Capricorn. Now they're backing into this particular cycle as Scorpio, Libra. And so every 8 years, Venus will retrograde in the same sign, slipping a few degrees every time round. So here we have the retrograde cycle since 2018 here on the screen. All these dates are the current cycle. So this is 2018 right here. This point is the last cycle, or that's, sorry, the sun. The last retrogrades, the cycles before, was 2010. So if you think back to 2010, Venus retrograde is about the unfinished business of relationship, and I'll also say it's the unfinished business of evaluating. So what your soul has deemed is important for your own soul growth. Any retrograde is a revisit, relive. So you're going to go backwards and take a look at something. And, you know, when it comes to emotions, we're never really quite resolved with them anyway. So that will dial that up. Any retrograde cycle is an intensification cycle. And certainly when you have Venus in Scorpio, that's intensified right to begin with. And Venus in Libra retrograde as well too. Libra is the sign of the scale. So when we have a retrograde, Venus retrograde in Libra, we are reviewing that which has gotten out of balance. And today, by the way, October 5th, today, tomorrow, the U.S. Senate is voting on Brett Kavanaugh and whether he will get put through for the Supreme Court. And there are enormous protests going on right now. The Me Too movement, you know, it's all of the social politics of the day. And I was thinking about this in terms of Scorpio and Libra. You know, do you push through with the agenda? You know, Scorpio is a fixed archetype. It's a fixated archetype as well too. So it will focus in on something. And Libra, one of the issues with Libra is overriding the information. So you can hear it, you can see it, you can witness it, but are you paying any attention to it? One of Libra's faults is to override the information, not to listen. And of course, Libra's greatest resource is the art of listening, when we can develop that art of listening. Anyway, food for thought in terms of what's taking place with prime example of it. Another interesting thing happened today too. A Nobel Peace Prize was awarded, I'm sorry I don't have their names, but to a doctor and an Iraqi victim of sexual violence. And this Nobel Peace Prize was given to these two who are combating sexual violence as a weapon of war. And just think of that as a statement for Venus and Scorpio. Scorpio being the sexuality archetype. So really interesting that that is one of the things for today. Venus has already turned retrograde. It's at station, and anything that is at station, that's the day that the planet is slowing down in its orbit to stop, to slow down, to pick up some speed. And so everything at the time of a station is magnified, intensified in terms of whatever it is. So it's very interesting, this Brett Kavanaugh thing, which is a, kind of a, well, it's a circumstance, but it's also kind of representational of the larger, bigger picture, evolution of our times and our collective consciousness in terms of the rebalancing of the social world order, and of course all that has to go with the denigration of the feminine, and so on and so forth. So very interesting times that we are living through. Here is a diagram of Venus has phases like the moon does. And so here we see the orbit of Venus going around the sun. What we have here, this inferior conjunction, this is an alignment of the Earth, the planet, and the sun. The inferior planet, Venus and Mercury, are inferior planets because they're in between the Earth and the sun. And when any planet's retrograde is its relationship to the sun, the planet isn't actually reversing direction and moving backwards, but it is because of where we are located, our position on Earth and the way we're looking at the planet. It appears as though it is reversed in motion. That's like two cars going down the highway at different speed. The faster planet is going surpassing the slower one, and it appears that if we look behind, we see that that slower car appears to be going backwards when it really isn't. Anyway, at inferior conjunction, as you can see in this diagram, Venus is showing us her dark side. So she's not illuminated. That's on the other side of the sun. The inferior conjunction, Venus never gets very far away from the sun, so it can't form an opposition. But we see here on this diagram here, inferior conjunction and superior conjunction. Inferior conjunction is what happens when the planet is retrograde, when Venus is retrograde. On October 26th, there will be an inferior conjunction of the moon and, of Venus and Saturn, Venus and the sun. And that represents the peak, the midpoint peak of the retrograde cycle. And it is also, you can loosely think of it as a new moon or a new phase for Venus. This is the beginning. And so Venus takes a retrograde once every 18 months. It's going to spend 9 months moving from inferior conjunction to superior conjunction. And at superior conjunction, again, the sun and Venus are aligned, but because the superior conjunction, Venus is on the other side of the sun, we can consider that like a full moon. So the inferior conjunction through the superior conjunction, we can think of that as a time of impregnation, development, and subjective development as well too. And the superior conjunction back to the inferior conjunction as the harvesting of whatever it is that has been developing from inferior conjunction to superior. So right now we are in about here, well, about here coming to the inferior conjunction. So we're kind of in a finishing off phase with the cycle that has just come by. So this is a culminating timetable when the unfinished business is revisited. And so Venus retrograde can bring someone from the past into your life, and that can be a lover from the past, can see you kind of replay a circumstance in your mind or revisit it in actuality. If there's some internal conflict that you might have, something unresolved, this might be you going through another analysis in terms of that. And so it is a very important time. Now, Venus will be, let me just move forward here. This is the alignment on October 26th. So we will have the Sun lined up with Venus and the Earth, and you can see this date here for that. And so working our way from now until then, let me just say that Venus has been already on a call at 4th, and you may have noticed this since the beginning of September, when Venus was moving through its preliminary shadow phase, crossing over the degrees, that it will now backtrack over while it is retrograde. So that's the principle of 3. So first we have the setting the program up, then we have the experiencing and processing of it, and then we have the resolution piece on the third pass of it, the integration resolution piece of it, solving it, and moving on from it. And again, as I say, when it comes to relationships, emotional things, I think that we're never really complete, but we have a way of getting to the next level with that. Let's move forward. Oops, I'm going to back up here. And this is, again, another diagram that is showing the dynamic of a retrograde planet. We have here both as inferior and superior, but I wanted you to look at this here at greatest western elongation or greatest eastern elongation with the inferior conjunction of Venus. This is when Venus is as the brightest in the sky. The western elongation will be about January 12th. And at elongation, if you're in the right place, you can see Venus as an evening star and a morning star. Now that it, as it forms the new phase conjunction, it will be hidden from view for a little bit before it rises again. All right, so just to recap before I move on here, let me see if I can pull this down here. I don't know whether you see that on your screen, but I see it online. Okay, so Venus retrograde October 5 to November 16. Yeah. Okay, and if you're a stickler for times, there they are on the screen. October 5th, 12:05 p.m. Venus stations retrograde at 10:50 Scorpio. On October 31st, Venus retrograde revisits Libra, and on November 16, it will turn direct at 25 degrees Libra. On November 26th will be the Venus-Sun inferior conjunction at 3 degrees Scorpio. So if you are, and I think I said a few moments ago, is December 12th that Venus surpasses the shadow degree here, December 17th. And January 6th, the greatest elongation. So if you, as I said, Venus, relationships are important to all of us. Venus covers two things: net worth, self-worth. So it covers relationships, and it covers money, materializing, and survival, all of those categories, mortality. So it is an important transit for all of us. It will be particularly potent, perhaps even life-altering, if it's hitting your chart directly. So we're dealing with the unfinished, unresolved business of relationships, a reevaluation on circumstances, that is your job, or how you're setting up your life. All relationships, intimate relationships, are of the nature of Venus retrograde, and specifically in Scorpio, sexuality too. But Venus retrograde is all primary one-on-one relationships. All right, so all the important ones. So Venus retrograde is a priority cycle when we're dealing with the priorities of the soul for our own evolution and our own growth. And also to money issues, of course. Today there's something on the news for the Canadian politics regarding carbon tax credits, and how the 4 of the provinces are balking at doing so. So we've got that going on. And as I said, Brett Kavanaugh, Christine Blasey Ford issue going on in the States, and so many other things on the planet. Indonesia recently 1-2 punch with tsunami and earthquake, and now they've got a volcano. So everywhere on the planet there are very critical things happening. You may know of somebody who is facing a health challenge, and maybe dealing with cancer or these kinds of things. Whatever it is, it's big living for sure. Let's see here. Screen is not moving forward. All right, so Venus retrograde then, Venus retrograde, any retrograde transit is going to be to revisit and relive. Venus retrograde, Venus is the planet of evaluating what is it that has value and meaning. So this is a reevaluation, reassessment cycle of significance. And Venus is the archetype of, Venus has 3 rulerships, Taurus, Libra, and Pisces. Pisces is a higher octave of the Venus cycle. Venus rules Taurus and Libra. And so in terms of what has value and meaning, it is about your magnetic resonance. Venus is the magnetic magnet planet. It is the magnetic attraction planet. It correlates to pheromones. It correlates to your magnetic aura, your how you are vibrating with yourself. It represents the psychology of inner hearing. So when you are tuning inwardly, what is it that you hear? And whatever it is that you hear is valuable to you, whatever it is that you are tuning into as value and meaning to you, will become the basis of how you are resonating with yourself, and therefore how you're sending out your vibes and what you are attracting. When Venus is retrograde, as I said, the soul is finding value and meaning in revisiting something important, something unfinished, unresolved regarding relationships. So this is that reevaluation of wants and needs. What are you getting out of it? And is it enough? What's the cost? What's the cost to you at a financial level, at an emotional level, at a psychic level, at a soul level? Do you love it? Do you, are you passionate about being here? Are you thriving in this? So Venus retrograde brings up the fated nature of circumstances. And because of this intensified magnetic pull, what you'll find during the Venus retrograde, and this started in September, if you felt this kind of compelling draw, if you felt that you were being pulled by something, you might have tuned into something as well too. You might have felt a vibe going on someplace, and even if somebody's not standing in front of you, you can still feel their vibe. And all of that was important information, because during that shadow piece, Venus was gathering up information. It was getting the buzz, it was getting the information and locking into it. So it was kind of setting up for the work that it is desiring to do during this next couple of months. So something compelling, the compelling nature of circumstance, what pulled you in. And Venus retrograde is fated, it is karmic, it is destined, it is about something key, something specific, as I said already, karmic soul priority. It's an intensification cycle. It intensifies the magnetism so that you're pulled into something. And this is important for that reason. That's why that is set up in that way. So this amplifies an inner focus, and certainly when you have Scorpio is a fixed archetype. It zeroes in on something. And Venus retrograde is an important questioning, soul-searching period. It intensifies the inner observation. It's a heightened awareness, and you are analyzing your emotions. This is like, you might have been saying to yourself all year, this isn't working for me, or I'm not getting my needs met, or what have you. Oftentimes we continue to run those kinds of tapes, but we're inert in terms of taking action on them. Venus retrograde is meant to force the issue so that you don't sit on the fence any longer, but that you actually begin to create some movement for yourself. And that's whether you choose to or are forced to. The cycle is meant to get you moving. Things are not moving here. Okay. All right. So Venus in Scorpio then. This is, plummeting. It's piercing through the veil. And Scorpio is about going deeper with whatever it is. This in-depth soul examination. It's an intensified motivation, an intensified fixation. So an intensified focus on the nature of your motivations, your fears, your desires, what's grabbed you, what has grabbed you. And as I said, magnetic vibrational intensity. So you can't help but, being drawn in by somebody else's energy field. So this is for an intensified emotional experience. We see it going on with the protests over Kavanaugh for sure, just one example. So the issues and triggers are, as we say, attraction to taboo. An attraction to taboo, that's anything that will unlock the mystery. So, that's what it's intrigue. We're attracted to something, we're intrigued by something because there's something there that is not revealed to us yet. And that's what makes it juicy, right? So that's what, where the draw is to go find out what's behind the curtain or what's behind the veil. So Venus retrograde and Venus retrograde in Scorpio. Scorpio is a compression archetype, and it peels off a layer and it goes down to another layer, and then it peels off another layer. It keeps going and going and going. So this is meant to penetrate through a number of layers till it gets right down to the core. It's about drilling right down to the core. What is driving you? What's the driving force behind this? Issues and triggers, trust, loss, hidden agenda, manipulations, betrayal, abuse, use, sex, sexuality, jealousy, retaliation, investments, how invested are you here? Obsession and compulsion and addiction, these are all Scorpio archetypes here. When we have Venus in Scorpio, we're tuning into those undercurrents. And we can see what's corrupt, and violence is also, an archetype of Scorpio. So it is about drilling and mining. Interestingly, Scorpio also rules things like oil. And again, in Canada, we have a lot of controversy over oil and pipelines and so forth. Right? Positive is understanding the depths of what is hidden or unconscious within the self. So the intention with this Venus in Scorpio is a psychoanalysis archetype here. It is for you to understand the nature of your motivations, intentions, and desires. And the reason for this examination, this intensified self-examination, is to make an internal adjustment, to create the realignment so that you are empowered rather than undermining or limiting yourself or allowing yourself to stay in situations that are undermining or limiting. And so this is the intention is to reclaim your personal core of power and to reconnect with your passion. It represents, it is a time, a cycle for accelerated soul growth and evolution. So there's two things in terms of the unfinished business. We can go into some, go do our shadow work and all that kind of, deep, dark stuff, the stuff that is very painful for us to deal with. On the other hand, this cycle can reconnect you to to source and reconnect you to resources of something that is within your treasure chest, as I say, you know, to resource something that is buried deep inside of you, which has great potential, and which helps you to create and to thrive and to move forward. So you may find that you get really turned on by a subject matter, or you may re-meet with somebody from your past, and it may be a karmic thing. It's of two natures. It's either you're going backwards and doing the, you know, trying to correct what has been broken down, or what, you know, what has gone awry in past lifetimes, or you have come to a point where now, you know, you're primed and ready to take that relationship from a past lifetime and move it to a higher level, or into new territory. And so it can be a fruition cycle as well too, just depending on how much work you've done. And let me just go to the next slide here before I, okay, Venus in Libra, because we will also experience Venus in Libra, and that will be the end of October through November 16 in retrograde, and then from November 16 to December 2nd in direct motion. So Venus in Libra, Libra is, again, all about relationship, and this is the sign of the scales. So when we are dealing with Venus retrograde in Libra, we are looking at what the heck has gotten out of balance. You know, and certainly we have a lot out of balance on our planet today. So this is the work that we're doing, the relationship imbalances. And imbalances of give and take, you know, the one-sidedness of relationship, one person on the give, and the other one on the take, right? Projected expectations, you know, when we enter into a relationship, we enter into it with an expectation that, you know, I've showed up here, I'm bringing my whole self to the table. And my unconscious projected expectation is that you're going to show up as like. And my unconscious projected expectations are that you are going to fulfill my ideals. That's the nature of the Venus's higher octave being Pisces, and the Neptune transit that we have right now as well too. So the nature of our ideals and how we take that and we project that onto others, and we make them our, you know, our ultimate savior, or our ultimate lover, or ultimate everything. And any time that you put a partner up on a pedestal, they are destined to fail, right? You know, so if we are, you know, living in our ideals without any sense of groundedness in that, that's when the disillusionment chapter comes in. And disillusionment in relationship when Venus is retrograde in Scorpio and in Libra is great. Certainly on a collective or social political level, there's a great deal of disillusionment with those who are running the show. So we see it at all different levels. Venus in Libra retrograde is revisiting or reassessing enmeshment, codependency, enabling, right? You know, so, and we often find ourselves unwittingly, you know, in an enmeshment situation, or unwittingly codependent on another. Conditional giving is one of the great flaws of a Libra imbalance archetype here, and that conditional giving is I will love you if. And so there's a tendency to get involved in a relationship because there is a hole or a void to fill. And whenever we are looking for someone else to complete us in that way, to fill a void, you know, it sets us up. That's a recipe for disaster. Venus in Libra, you know, it's about the best relationships, or the most successful relationships, are relationships that are formed on desire, not on need. I'm here because I want to be, not because I need to be. And when we have two equals in a relationship, then we do have balance, and we do have win-win in relationship for both individuals to be recognized, right? Venus in Libra, another flaw of Venus in Libra is overriding the information, hearing what you want to hear instead of hearing the other person's reality. So, and Libra is the archetype of feedback as well too, and we can override the feedback. And that's kind of the feedback now that the American public is dishing on Kavanaugh, I think, and whether the Republican Party is actually going to listen to that or not. Jury's still out. Vote hasn't happened yet, so we shall see. Venus in Libra, public opinion and social norms. Libra is, the archetype of the social context of relationships, and this is where we all like to be the same. And, Libra is about the realm of appearances. So we all like to have some sense of normalcy, or, have some kind of sense of that this is the way relationships go and this is the way it should be. But, there's a difference between the appearance of and what's underneath the hood. And this is what the retrograde cycle is meaning to expose. Venus in Scorpio retrograde, Venus retrograde is exposing, it's revealing. It's peeling back the curtain. And again, in terms of Venus in Libra, as I said, we override. Oftentimes we're not listening. We don't listen well enough. But this cycle is meant for us to be bombarded with a message until we pay attention to it. So positively, Venus in Libra, the art of observing, of listening, of taking that information in and using the feedback, applying the feedback. It is the art of diplomacy. We've just finished the NAFTA agreement, Canada-US, and that took quite a great deal of finesse in terms of diplomacy for Canada, I think. Finding middle ground, cooperative, co-creative, this is the win-win alliances. So, as I said, relationships formed on desire, not on need. All right. Right. So we have the cycle here is quite interesting. Oh, I apologize. Let me go back here. I'm trying to move my screen so that I can read it myself here. Move that down. So Venus begins retrograde in Scorpio while the Sun is in Libra. And again, any retrograde is that planet's relationship to the Sun. So from now through the Sun's entrance into Scorpio on the 23rd of October, we have Venus retrograde in Scorpio, Sun in Libra. Then at the end of the month, we will have Venus retrograde in Libra and the Sun in Scorpio, so switching positions here. With that retrograde midpoint happening on October 26th. The inferior conjunction, I call it that, an illumination peak. That is where it's a consciousness raising peak. The Sun is the creator principle, and in this case, it raises the consciousness. Very interesting that this transit is going on right now with so much at stake, especially regarding the USA in terms of what is and everywhere on the planet. I mean, there's Brexit and there's so many different things going on. Legalization of pot later on this month, and so many different things. But interesting about is Venus retrograde right now. So Venus retrograde in Scorpio is about peeling back the layers, right? It's about zeroing in on it. And the Sun in Libra is giving us multi-dimensional. Libra is a diverse archetype. So it's showing us a lot of different angles of the same issue, of the core issue that we are looking at. And the Sun in Libra gives us the opportunity to examine that from a variety of different perspectives. So that's what that transit is doing. When Venus retrogrades into Libra and the Sun is in Scorpio, so that creator principle here, the Sun is taking it to a deeper level. And Venus retrograde in Libra at that time is now, where the Sun is creating the kind of the multi-dimension, the complexity of, well, Scorpio is a complex archetype anyway, it's giving the complex dynamics, kind of reflecting off all the different angles here. Well, Venus is retrograde in Scorpio targeting, and Sun in Libra, the creative principle of showing us the multifaceted dynamics of whatever it is that we're looking at. Now we have Venus retrograde in Libra, and the Sun in Scorpio. The Sun is now fixated, now coming down to the core of the issue. And Venus in retrograde is, again, an assessment on choice makings here, of taking in that information and observing now in a more direct and more pinpointed way during that second half of the cycle. And again, this is now starting to seed. There's so many levels with this retrograde transit. It's very, very interesting. Now, what I've got on the screen right here now is some information about skip steps. Venus is squaring the karmic axis. It's called a skip step in evolutionary astrology. The terminology in classical astrology is at the bendings. And so that's when Venus is at a 90-degree angle to the nodes. So right now Venus is in Scorpio, and it's squaring the south node in Aquarius and the north node in Leo. So the south node in Aquarius deals with, again, social politics. You know, that's that Venus in Scorpio penetrating the social politics, the social norms, you know, that we've lived with for so long. And south node in Aquarius brings up the trauma piece of exactly that, you know, that which has become fragmented, and that's what we're disassociating ourselves from, and what has become, what is in radical need of being readdressed. Let's put it that way. Okay. And the north node in Leo is raising the consciousness of self. So, you know, this is an individuation timetable. Aquarius brings up the group, you know, the group consciousness. Venus in Scorpio is penetrating the group consciousness to get to that north node, which is about self, putting self back at center. So to find the creative center again, so it's a huge adjustment. Venus squaring the karmic axis here is, bringing us to a moment where we are needing to replace self at center and to find some self-consistency. This is our relationship here skewed. We're standing at some crossroads now. You know, when we come up to a skip step, it is coming up to a barrier that we have not yet surpassed. You know, so we keep coming up to this barrier, and then we keep falling back on the old ways. And certainly with North Node and Aquarius, you know, it's kind of the shock and trauma piece where we go like, oh, that's outrageous. And then we all go back home and we just keep going, you know, plodding along, the same way, you know. So we need a breakthrough point. And Venus and Scorpio with this a North and South Node, Leo Aquarius, is meant to have that breakthrough piece. Now the skip step is going to move from Venus in Scorpio, South Node in Aquarius, North Node in Leo, to Venus in Libra, South Node in Capricorn, North Node in Cancer. That brings up the era, the collective ages of, you know, patriarchal domination, the authority of the day, Capricorn, organized consensus, and how that organized consensus now, you know, the the Cancer Capricorn archetype is, bringing the past up for review in Libra, and that is to realign. We've gotten very, the masculine feminine is completely out of balance, right? And so this is really some very, very big stuff in terms of collective eras. Again, we come to the big picture viewpoint of the ending of a whole age of man, and how now the understanding of the conditioning factors by which we have allowed for dominance and submission and superiority and inferiority, that's all on a major breakdown now, as the feminine is looking to reclaim her voice, right? And looking to reclaim equality, and how humanity is looking to reclaim equality, right? So it's an amazing, amazing time. Now that's even made even more amazing because the Venus skip step coincides with Pluto crossing the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the sun's apparent path projected into space. And Pluto crossing the ecliptic from north to south is the first time that this has happened since 1930. And this is, Pluto crossing over its own nodes as well, too. When Pluto crossed over the ecliptic, it was illuminated, and it was shortly after that that Pluto was discovered. So this is a brightening of the content of Pluto, and in terms of evolutionary astrology, we relate Pluto to the soul and the soul path, and certainly this is a statement for a collective consciousness that is in a major shift. In 1930, that was the Great Depression came in. So this is a very important. This Pluto crossing the ecliptic, I'm kind of loosely referencing it as a Pluto eclipse. And so this is setting up whatever the dynamics are that are being set up globally, collectively, whatever the events are around this time, the end of October, beginning of November, throughout this Venus retrograde cycle, have a great deal more potency than average. And what they are really doing with this is seeding a new collective consciousness that is going to take us into a new era. It's that big. I mean, that might sound like woo-woo, but in actuality, we're looking at what's taking place in the personal life, what's taking place in social politics, social political scapes. And Venus is also a survival mortality archetype. That's got to do with survival on the planet at all the levels here. And we've got Pluto crossing the ecliptic. So big stuff is taking place here. At the same time, Venus is doing a skip step with the karmic axis. Uranus is doing a skip step with the karmic axis as well, too. And it is in Taurus, squaring the Aquarius-Leo nodes. And on the day of the U.S. by-election, Uranus retrograde backs into Aries, and the nodes back into Cancer, Capricorn. So what's going on, symbolically, what's going on in the States is, kind of representational of what's going on for all of us, really, so as a collective, right? All right. And I think I said this just earlier here. So Venus in Libra squaring the south node in Capricorn and the north node in Cancer. The resolution node is the north node in Cancer. So this is for us now to start building the reality in some kind of new way and to find a level of self-consistency. That's what the north node in Cancer is. Cancer, Capricorn is those are two archetypes that deal with security patterns, right? So North Node in Cancer is meant to begin us on a phase where we become more secure within finding emotional self-consistency. So this is a kind of a big project here in terms of your own personal evolution here. Uranus retrograding into Aries is going to backtrack into Aries until February, March. It'll go back into Taurus and then be there. Uranus retrogrades in 84, or Uranus moving through a sign is an 84-year transit. So most of us have not experienced Uranus in Taurus and so forth, right? So these things are coming. Venus in opposition to Uranus, again, is another breakthrough point, and that opposition took place September 12 and October 31st, and on November 30th, again, we'll have that opposition. So, and that's because of the retrograde. It happens 3 times in that small period of time. Now, there's something additional too here. So, just to recap, Venus squaring the nodes mid-September, end of October, beginning of November, end of November, beginning of December. Those are peaks. Those are critical mass points where we're right up at we're at the intersection, and are we going to actually make that breakthrough and be able to travel through the intersection and into a whole new reality base? And Uranus squares the nodes mid-September to mid-December of 2018, so we're doing that as well too. Now, additionally to that transit, we've had Mars retrograde this year, and Mars was retrograde from the end of June through the end of August. Mars is the other half of the relationship duo. Mars entered into Aquarius in May 15, the same day that Uranus moved into Taurus. And so Mars in Aquarius is about personal reinvention. It's also about social and political reinvention, and certainly South Node in Aquarius as well too is revolutionary times, right? And this is all we're going through, accelerated evolution, revolution for evolution, all of that kind of stuff. All right. So when Mars was retrograde from the end of June through the end of August, this was a time frame of pull back, and it gave us more opportunity. That was not being able to go forward. That was enforcing you to pull back, and hopefully to gather the intention with the transits to gather more objectivity, right? Sort of pull back, and maybe at that timetable you were into something else, or something else was starting to form, but in any case, the whole transit is about personal reinvention. Mars is the cutting edge of soul desires in any given period of time. It's the contemporary will of the soul in the here and now. So it's present time. Mars is present time. When Mars turns retrograde, it is about changing the inner behavior, changing your behavior. Venus is retrograde, it is about reevaluating. And so what happens is that Venus retrogrades at the square aspect. It retrogrades at 10 degrees Scorpio, and Mars retrograde at the end of June at 10 Aquarius. So that is what we call a square relationship between the two. So Venus was already, from a background place, already doing its reassessment, while Mars was in the lead, so to speak. Now, Mars regained, it's on its final leg of Aquarius until November 15. And this is the really strong portion of that cycle. And Mars has been relevant to the karmic axis. It has been traveling with the South Node. On the 24th, 25th of September, the day that Bill Cosby was sentenced to jail, was the day that Mars and Uranus went Mars and the South Node went new phase. So anything that's on the South Node is bringing up the past. But when Mars goes new phase to that, the instincts and the impulses are for new choices. So we already have Mars in Aquarius ready for new choices, right? Already oriented instincts, impulses to reach for something new. Okay. Now we've had Venus just starting its retrograde. On the 10th of October, today's the 5th, so just a few days from now, Mars and Venus are again in square. So now Venus is retrograde and Mars is moving direct. And I think about these like taking two stones and smashing them together and getting that flint strike. So we're going to see some kind of forward motion on that day. Also on that day, Mercury and Uranus are in opposition, so I would wonder what kind of volatility there is out there, whether there are demonstrations and protests and riots or all kinds of things could happen on that day, but it's certainly going to be a moving forward time. So it is the potential for a breakthrough. If you have not had the courage to be self-consistent, which is what all these transits are trying to get you to do, is be self-consistent in the way that you are approaching getting your essential needs met, and this is in terms of not undermining what is in your better interest, but choosing because it is going to create a reward for you. It's going to create benefit for you. It's going to give you an opportunity to thrive instead of to extinguish whatever is there, right? So this is a very, very important time with Mars and Venus on a flint strike, with Venus and Uranus squaring the karmic axis, which is bringing us to crossroads of great significance, bringing us to a stoplight that we haven't been able to pass go with yet. So know that life altering over the next couple of months, you bet. I expect everything to be quite dialed up. Here is the Venus-Sun inferior conjunction on October 26th for those who are astrologically versed. Here's Venus 3 degrees Scorpio right there, and here's the karmic axis 0 Aquarius Leo, and Uranus there as well too. So we shall see what these transits deliver when we get there. Sorry, trying to move my things out of the way here. And this is Venus and Uranus squaring the nodes. I put November 30th just because you can see Venus at 29 degrees, culminating degree, and Uranus just having backed into Aries here, while the nodes as well too are at 28 degrees. So cardinal signs, you know, these are instigating archetypes here. We'll have Venus retrograde. The day that Venus retrograde ends is the day that Mercury retrograde begins, and so we've got an extension here of search for our truth and so forth. Let's just go to the next one. Here's the U.S. by-election, and as you can see, that takes place on the day. It is in the morning. I put here 8 a.m. for Washington. In the morning, Uranus will be 0 Taurus. Sorry, here, Uranus Taurus, and the nodes are 0 Aquarius and Leo. And as the day moves forward, Uranus backs into Aries, and the nodes go into Cancer, Capricorn. So it's quite an intense day for this election. We shall see. I had to put this up as well too, because another big thing that's happening this month is that Canada legalizes cannabis. And I have here on the inner wheel the chart for that, which I put at 0 degrees Ottawa, because that's when it becomes legal. And I have the date for pot prohibition in Canada. It was different in different countries, but cannabis was once legal and became an illegal substance for Canada on April 23rd, 2023. And it's very interesting because they were afraid at that point of what cannabis might do, and now we're having pot legalized. And one of the reasons for that, besides the fact that it's probably going to be quite a profitable business, is that Canada is trying to stop the black market. So we've got you know, kind of from both perspectives of trying to save the public from themselves, so to speak. And just very interesting, from what I read, they said that that legislation was a late night meeting. I put 9 p.m. Just as a guess, but it is interesting that the moon at that time was at 1 degrees Leo, and here we have the North Node for the date of legalization at 2 degrees, so that's a culminating pattern there. And we have Jupiter in Scorpio again, and in Scorpio now. And we have Venus, which, Chiron at 29 degrees Pisces, and the Venus transit for the prohibition at 27 degrees. So there's a interesting statement there as well too with that. So very interesting to see. That is for astrology students to do more analysis with that. So, and here's a beautiful, I'm very sorry I forgot to write down who the sculptor was of this, but a very beautiful, luscious sculpture of Venus. And so I will leave it there for today. There's probably a lot more that I could say that I forgot to say, but to give you something to go on, essentially for you to know that this is a very potent few months for moving through relationships, and it is for you to face yourself honestly in terms of what it is that you are investing in and whether it is in your better interest or not, and to realign with what is in your higher and best goods, and to recognize, as I said, you don't always get what you want, but through this cycle you are going to get what your soul needs for your own evolution. So if it's painful, If it's a brutal experience, then know that you have chosen this. So know that that is your soul's courage. And the suggestion is with the Venus and Uranus squaring the nodes, that it's a time is up or a time is ripe, that you've come now to a moment that is especially opportune, especially ripe for moving the karma forward, for moving yourself into a new phase of your life, a new way of relating. And Uranus certainly gives us the opportunity to have huge, significant breakthroughs. So I will leave it there for today. If you'd like to, you're not on my monthly mail out already, and you'd like to get my free monthly newsletter, there's my website there, rosemarcus.com. And if you'd like a reading, you can find out information on my website as well too. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best in this very, very, very important time.